Welcome, everyone. I'm Joe Nease. I'm the gallery owner, in case you didn't know. This is Amanda Hunter, our gallery manager. And this is Kathy McTavish, the artist. All this work is hers. We have the sound turned off, but we'll turn it back on after we're finished here. A lot of you may know Kathy. She's exhibited quite a bit in the region. Typically, her work is specific to the space. It's an installation. This is one of the first times that there hasn't been projected imagery in the space. Kathy won a Jerome Hill grant, a 2-year grant, a significant grant that helps quite a bit with experimenting with new work. And these textile pieces relate very much to the imagery that you see on the screen. That's the source of the thread work. I guess I'll leave it at that. I'll let Kathy talk a little bit about it.
So my sister has been a long-arm quilter for many years, and she has in her shop, so she has a quilting studio here in Duluth. So she has a machine that it's a computerized machine, so it has a computer that drives a robotic quilting machine. And because I've been working with code a lot and been interested in how to map sort of some of this generative code literature into different forms, sound, animation, books, I was kind of interested in mapping it into this the very physical process of sewing. So she was very, very kindly, generously taught me the complexities of how to do this, and also was always there for me as I was trying to evolve. Originally, artistically, I was a cellist, and when you play the cello is a very, you're creating sound that absolutely, you have the instrument, but the instrument of the room is really, really important, right? So space is really, really important for that type of instrument, for almost any type of music making. And so I started being aware of, I started doing installation work that was sort of cross-sensory, and really, I like working in space as well because it allows the viewer to have this sort of near-far experience. So you have these gazes that sometimes take in the whole room, but then you can kind of move close into work and sort of see something. So it rewards the viewer to kind of move in closer to work. I like that with sound as well. I like to have sound positioned in a space so that you have the experience of being able to move in and hear something more articulately, a single voice, but then you have the experience of the all over, all these individual threads responding together, mixing together. And I really like to work with multithreadedness, polyphonic forms, and that zoomability of being able to have the near far intimate experience and yet moving out and having a larger gaze.
Talk about this concept of eternal drawing and how that's an important impulse to you and how it spreads across the different media that you work into. And I wonder if you'd say more about that for us.
Yeah, when I was playing the cello, it kind of felt like it was actually, so I did improvisational cello primarily. So as I was creating this line of sound, I have this feeling that it was like a line of sound, right? Like it's a sine wave. It's these things that you're creating, you're moving into space. So it's like this, it is this act of drawing in a sense, and that's what it felt like to me. And so I feel like over and over again, I really, the impulse, that vector, that act of drawing, I feel like that is sort of this really core form. And I like the idea that there's this, that we, other people have talked about this as well, other artists have worked from this, but the idea that there's a continuous line, this infinite line that in our lives we draw a line for a while and then work on, but there's this infinite line that spreads from us, and that we just participate, we touch that line for a while. And I think there's something about the infinite, like this over and over again, or this relentlessness, I feel like in our times, like this act of just resistant, like the always speaking. And so like I like to create this generative work that's just like 24/7, it's just the always speaking. So what's happening in these machines, there's a little bit of code that, as Jen, you can see that they're using a code base, but they're similar but different, right? So I like to have that sense of something that's generating, like I set up some parameters, but within that it has freedom to create and to keep creating. And so that infinite creation, so that's what's happening here with both the sound. There's little sound buffers that have been recorded from, my experiences collaborating with other people. I've taken some of their sound. They've been generous to give me some of their sound, my own sounds. And then I just it has this library of these sounds that it keeps weaving together. So it's continuously, it's nothing static, nothing's fixed. It's just the always drawing, the sort of infinite speaking, the infinite flow. If you think about this as being a fast frame rate in a certain way, so that frames per second being quick, this is like a really slow frame, like 0.0001 frames per second or something. But I work in series, so it feels similar to film in that way, but it's just a slow, wrought act of creating an artifact of making. So when I was working on this cloth, I think because my partner's a writer, it's like I there's all these things that have such rich metaphor space to them, right? And then I think with like orchestration, it's like weaving, So what's happening in the room, it's like this weaving. And what's interesting before, one of the origins of computers actually was something called the jacquard loom. It was like these computerized. It was like there was these punch cards that would drive, kind of like a player piano would make this fabric. And what was really interesting about, I think we always have this relationship to machines that's actually deeply intimate as humans, so that machine teaches us something. So it taught people how to think about breaking down very complex mathematical problems into computable things, right? So it was like, and also it gave, and automating something that felt to us like a computational thing. And so I think that metaphor just sparked this incredible development in mathematics and ideas about computability of problems, solvability of problems, and also it actually physically led to the first computers. So I was sort of interested in that, obviously the metaphor of weaving, like who's not to like that, right? I mean, it's just such a deep, cloth, string, breaking, like mending, that form is just so rich. It's a brilliant form. It's in all cultures. It's a very, very old human form. Started with knots. These ideas about how do you do something besides like kill an animal for a fur, right? I mean, it's like it's useful to think about how to make clothing or make fabric, and it's a very interesting form. Yeah. So again, this is how art happens. Like, so I had a commission through the Tweed Museum of Art, and so they bought all these machines, and then they gave them to me amazingly when I was done. So the way I've been thinking about them is this eternal canvas in a way. So the gift of this canvas that I can keep writing work into.
Okay.
And the nice thing about these are very mundane, everyday computers. They're not fancy. They're not huge computing power. They're mundane, but everything's running in a browser. And I like to work with web technologies because it's so ubiquitous. It's just like written word creating things. So I like its simplicity and its availability and its affordability, its accessibility. You could get this on your phone right now. Like this, you could tune into this and you'd all be in tune with like red color, right? That's happening in the room right now. So it's like, so I like that piece to the web. And so I feel like, so this is just an ordinary machine connected to the internet. And this is sort of the landscape of our everyday life right now, right? And then these devices are so problematic too, right? If they're surveilling us, they're, this sort of network space is computing our recidivism risk, our credit scores, our targeted ads, our political susceptibilities, but I feel like I refuse, I feel like early days of coding, there was this dream of a common language, this dream of an information exchange that was behind the internet, and I feel that these, I just refuse. Like I feel like this is a queer spider. Like this is the queer sheet. This is like this is this other space. It's not a masculinized technical space. No. Like I feel, can it be something else?
Yeah.
I won't let it go. And I feel like it's this network. It's something else. It's a web. It's a multithreadedness. It's like individual and yet the togetherness. It's like these other dynamics that it displays. It's a honey, it's a lure, it makes sound, it's rubbing colors together, it's drawing. That is what it can do as well. And I feel like it's a loom. And so I want to think about multi-threaded, multilingual spaces where there's these independent threads, there's this polyphony, there's these independent threads, and yet there's this connectedness. Is it so hard? Is it so hard? When I'm thinking about how to hang them, it took a long time to think about how I wanted the sleeve, for example. The quilters have lots of different ways that they do that, because obviously that's a problem that they always have to solve. But then my dad actually had this thought of, he gave me one of these strips of wood with these holes and some of this parachute cord, and it was like, and always, I've learned with my dad, like, because he's just very good with just offering me things. You know, he'll offer something, and right away I'll think, that's not what I had in mind sometimes, because it's like I'll have something, you know, but I've learned to like take a second and go back, because often there's this gift to it, right? Because like I am completely in love with parachute cord now, and I love, it's just another element, and I really loved how this worked. So just like little gifts like that, and the way like Joe thought about lighting things. I mean, there's just teeny gifts that add up to the sculptural whole, and really an exhibit is a sculptural whole. So without, I find to me working with, I call it curators, like it's like a huge gift.
One more comment. When you think about the surfaces that are created that are facing out from these walls, what does it make you think about the surfaces that are not facing out? What is the thought about, let's say, front and back?
Yeah, so I feel like there's this near far that I call it, I don't know what, I call it the near far really, but it's like this thing of, I think that's really, that reveal, conceal, right? Like those vulnerabilities, like some of the ripped, like I started showing more and more of the vulnerabilities of it. Because in fact, every end of line, you're ripping, you're cutting, knotting, there's like, I like that reveal, conceal kind of thing, that it opens up this possibility of the behind and front, that kind of, and also it opens up the possibility of resonances, like so things are speaking to each other, across.
Because I'm not familiar with coding, are those opportunities existent in coding as well, or you make a mistake and that actually leads to innovation rather than disaster?
Yeah, like in fact, it's hilarious sometimes. It feels like it's like, because you're kind of talking to this machine, right? Like you're writing these notes to the machine, and the machine's kind of like, you mean this? And it's like, no, I really didn't mean that. It's like, and sometimes the accidents are so great, you wish you could keep them, but then go, so I don't know. So there's this whole form of digital art called glitch art, which is kind of interesting because it's actually taking the ways that software or code that, so bad code, so bad software, like ways you can have a bad communication thing happen. I think it's, definitely code is just like writing. It's just like, as sure as writing can go really wrong, and you always put down what you didn't mean, so it's kind of interesting.
Well, when I look at these, I also see the time-based notion of notation of something. I know as a musician that you've done really experimental things with group performance and stuff. Could you imagine that, putting a cellist in front of each of these and having them play it?
Well, I think of like, now I've been thinking about scores. Obviously I come from that, so like there's some creative people doing amazing score work, and so I do obviously think, like it just comes to you, right, about the score thing. And so I've kind of been thinking about like what comes first. Like so the score, that's the generator of sound, whether that be literal, like notation, or maybe more interpretive. And or if or is this actually an artifact of sound? And so I've been kind of thinking about that, like that loop, it's the source and the artifact. It's the imprint of sound. So it's a way of being able to, like for me, it's this way of being able to, physically manifest, like see sound in a different. I think I use that my sound thing is like my biggest impulse.
Did you use sound to generate the code?
In that way that I don't feel like the senses are so different, and like I feel like I'm kind of a sound person, So I think in terms of like drawing sound, like, or, you know, like the sound patterns, you know, sound friction, resonance, you know, that thing about chordal rubbing together of two sounds that make a chord, make a movement, you know, like that kind of thing I think is really key.
Yeah.
Noise, you know, like dissolving into noise, you know, kind of assembling into an emergent pattern that we recognize as sound, as a certain melodic impulse or something. So I think it kind of goes back and forth. And I've worked with some really amazing improvisational musicians that if I know that they would find things that I couldn't even begin to dream of, just because and it's really coming from them, you know, because they're just really good, intuitive players. At first, I thought I would do a lot more. So I'm actually coding like, you know. So if I at first I thought I would program the whole, you know, these quilts, this whole things. And then I really liked the physical interaction with the machine. So then I started stripping back and thinking that, no, actually I'm going to code these vocabularies, these utterances. And so that's going to be my language. You know, that I'm going to get this finite language. And then I'm going to allow for it. So there's randomness within that language, but then also allow myself to then do placement. You know, so I could have, I wanted to put myself back in, so that I wanted to be more collaborative with the machine. So then I started actually allowing myself to interject, you know, and then allowing myself, the human, to add these things that are bad, like the bad sides. Sometimes I've started doing some freehand work, where it's like it's not perfect, you know. It's like so I was really interested in kind of almost like I guess I wanted that human back, you know, like this. So I kind of started feeling like it was more like that, and that idea about cinching it down, right? Because you don't want the phrase, you know, like the threads to escape. Like they always worry on the threads not escaping. So it's like, so just to cinch it down, like doing these like cinches, you know. So I kind of like that physical, you know, that human cinching, yeah. Nodding, cinching, yeah.